Welcome to Aon at the Top, where I have the honor of interviewing some of the most distinguished executives, C-suite, and board members about their journeys and paths to success. I'm your host, Nicole Ward, the Senior Vice President of Sales at Aon. In this series, we draw out meaningful insights and candid perspectives on navigating to the top. At Aon, we help you make better business decisions by turning risk into resilience. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for Aon's podcast series, Aon at the Top. I'm your host, Nicole Ward, the Senior Vice President of Sales at Aon. And in this series, I have the honor of interviewing some of the most distinguished executives, C-suite, and board members to draw out meaningful insights and candid perspectives on how they navigated their way to the top. Today, we get to welcome Dana Hollinger. From steering billion-dollar pension funds to shaping global governance standards, Dana Hollinger is a powerhouse in finance, strategy, and boardroom leadership. Dana Hollinger brings a wealth of experience at the intersection of finance, governance, and risk. She serves on the board of directors of Apollo Private Markets IDC, helping expand innovative investment solutions for accredited investors. Previously, Dana sat on the CalPERS Board of Administration, overseeing more than $500 billion in assets, where she chaired the Risk and Audit Committee and helped shape the strategic vision for one of the world's largest pension funds. She's also been a partner at ABG, advising private equity fund founders and entrepreneurs on governance, fundraising, and global growth strategies. Her leadership extends beyond finance. Dana has served on the International Corporate Governance Network, advised the Toronto Stock Exchange Innovation Growth Fund, and contributed thought leadership on investing in pensions. She is also deeply engaged in education and community, serving as a trustee at several schools and foundations. A lawyer by training, with degrees from American University and Southwestern Law School, Dana combines sharp financial acumen with a passion for building strong, future-focused institutions. Dana, your background speaks for itself. It's amazing, and I'm so excited to get into the conversation, and thank you for being here today.
Nicole, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you so much for having this series of Aon at the Top. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. I love it. Good. So, all right. So I'd love to dig in a little bit on the personal side. You've built, obviously, a remarkable career across finance, insurance, healthcare, governance, et cetera. But I'd like it if we could go back to the beginning and tell us a little bit about like where you grew up and how did your early environment and experiences shape your drive and ambition?
Great. Well, I actually grew up in the San Fernando Valley, specifically in Encino. And I really believe my dad shaped my foundation for success. My father was an optometrist in downtown Los Angeles. And from, I think, the age of 5 years old, my dad had us working every Saturday. It was my dad, me, my two older brothers, and my mom in his optometrist practice in downtown Los Angeles.
Put you to work, huh?
He put me to work.
At a young
yes.
age. I love it.
So what that taught me, number one, was financial responsibility. 2, I had to be on time. And 3, my dad being in downtown LA at that time, it was how to relate to a diverse group of people. A lot of people, they worked downtown as doctors and lawyers, but then there were a lot of welfare recipients, people out of jail. So it really developed my skills to interact with a diverse group of people. And I guess the big takeaway from all that for me is the lesson that I learned is all the essential things in life have to be earned. Nothing is given.
That's a wonderful opportunity, and how great that your father afforded you with that. And it's just such a great place to build from, right? I love that. And were there pivotal moments when you think back of either people that inspired you, or, leaders that particularly spoke to you as examples, in terms of mentors?
Yes, there were. And the particular person that really stands out to me the most is John Anderson. He's not as well known as a Warren Buffett or a Michael Bloomberg, but John Anderson was a billionaire. He was a philanthropist. The Anderson School of Business bears his name. And at the time, John was the largest business owner in LA with over 40 businesses. And God, when I think about him, I want to choke up because he meant so much to me. But John managed through all of that to find the time to mentor about 30 women about finance and investing in companies. And he called our group Club 1800. And I was one of those women. And we met once a month for 12 years.
Wow.
And the lesson, unfortunately, women or even men, nobody knows how a billionaire really thinks. And what I learned from John that I hadn't thought about before was everything you do should be profitable for you. So not just in business and seeing a return on your investment, but even in your personal relationships, your friendships. If we're friends, I should make you feel good. You should feel supported by me. So the other valuable takeaways, besides everything should be profitable, were that always invest long term. So that was the genesis of me always being a long-term investor. And I also looked at my personal relationships as, is this someone I want to know in 25 years, and being a long-term investor? And the other thing, taxes matter. What's the after-tax return? So it was truly on a service level as well. The other thing that John did that really stood out, before every meeting each month, he would say to us, what have you done to make the world a better place? So it was also about giving back.
That's such a great, I didn't know that story about John Anderson or that background. And I have the fortune of knowing you personally, and I'd never heard you share that. And that's amazing. The 1800 Club is what you call it.
Yeah,
is that
Club
right?
1800.
Club 1800. Sounds like a movie in the making there. Whoever's listening, take note. I love that. So clearly you don't get to where what you've accomplished and what you've experienced without some grit. And you shared a little bit about, your dad instilling some of that in you. But what were some of the challenges that you faced early on? And how did they impact, you as the leader that you are today?
The challenge that I faced early on is that it was not a level playing field for women. For example, men dominated the networking and the business building relationships. And I couldn't compete the same way, because if I asked a guy to dinner or to go to a Laker game with me or to play a round of golf, it may have been misinterpreted.
Suggestive. Yes.
Right. So you're at a deficit. And what that did, or the quality, and the other thing, I didn't grow up with relationships, with connections. I didn't attend an Ivy League. So what it did for me as a leader is it created tremendous empathy in me for understanding of people, depending on where they're coming from, who didn't grow up with connections or money or attended the Ivy Leagues, the challenges and obstacles that they had to overcome to succeed.
Very interesting. Like you say, it's one thing if you're sort of born into those, but to claw through and build and to do that on your own is even more of a challenge.
Right.
That's wonderful. If you could go back and think about yourself when you were really beginning your professional journey, what would you tell yourself now that would have been useful and maybe fast tracked you?
Yeah, fast. I'm not sure it would have fast tracked me.
Well,
but
it would have helped.
But the thing, I did not grow up in a generation of role models. My mother just went to high school. I was the first woman in my family to go to college. So what I would say to myself is it's not how many times you get knocked down, get right back up, and never, never, never give up.
I love that. It's great. I think there's a lot of people that are aspiring to do what you've done, that's a great thing to hear,
Yeah.
So when you think about all of the milestones in your career, I mean, you've had your own firm, the Dana Hollinger Group. You've been, with ABG on the CalPERS board, et cetera. Were there key milestones along the way when you think that was a critical decision for my professional growth, and why?
It wasn't so much as I could say, oh, that was a key milestone, but the personal growth in the journey, number one, get used to being uncomfortable. Because in order to break through or break ahead, it does not always feel good. It's uncomfortable. And you have to get used to that to keep climbing. And so it was the personal journey of challenging myself and overcoming discomforts. And ultimately, it was that journey that led me to go on my own. And the reason I went on my own was, in a way, it was the only way I could compete and level the playing field. And that was the inspiration. Now, when I did that, and all of a sudden I didn't have a public company behind me, there was no AIG, there was no AXA, there was no Nationwide. Initially, it's a leap, but ultimately it strengthened my confidence and resolve.
Wow. And it's interesting what you said there about, the personal growth, the personal development, and leaning into what's hard.
Right.
I think we forget that sometimes. I think a lot of us want the easy button because we feel like it's already hard.
Right.
But I think rewiring ourselves to be like, ooh, this is uncomfortable, to use your word. I want to lean into this because there's a gift in here somewhere when I get to the other side. And I think that's wonderful advice for folks to hear. Because when you want something and you keep your eyes focused, on the goalposts, somehow you force yourself to make it work,
Right.
Yeah. A great example. And when you think about, because you've crossed so many sectors, right? You've been in healthcare, you've been in finance, insurance, how have those experiences in those industries shaped your approach to sort of your thinking around governance and strategy and oversight?
Well, I think for companies to be successful long term, you have to have good governance, effective leadership. And as a board member, it's about me supporting the CEO to be an effective steward of the organization. So I see it as the underpinnings and the foundation for long-term value creation.
Okay, very fair. And pivoting a little bit to to specific governance questions here, I'd love to know,
as it relates to CalPERS, you were appointed by Governor Jerry Brown to
Right.
represent the insurance industry on the CalPERS board. And I'd love it if you could share, maybe how that appointment happened and what drew you to the role.
Sure. It's kind of a funny story. Well, first of all, let me just provide a little bit of context.
Sure.
Before I joined or was appointed to the CalPERS board, there was only one other woman on the board. And the insurance industry chair, that chair on the CalPERS board, is the only one that requires a financial background. You have to have been in the insurance industry. So Governor Brown was determined to appoint a woman. And I think prior to me, maybe it was the head of State Farm or Allstate, they had left the board. And the seat sat vacant for 13 or 14 months because he couldn't find a woman. So that gives you the backdrop. Fast forward, I had a girlfriend who asked me to attend a meeting where the head of appointments for Governor Brown was going to be speaking. And initially I told her I couldn't attend because at the time I had to pick my son up from school 30 minutes after this meeting was to start. But she said, please come. So reluctantly, I agreed. So since it was a small meeting, we all introduced ourselves. I said I was in the insurance industry, etc. Then I looked at the time and I had to go. Well, the woman from the governor's appointment office was on the lectern, and as I snuck out of the room, she leaves the lectern and follows me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, she thinks I insulted her. I show the text. No, I really had to leave, pick up my son. I'm so sorry. And she said to me, we're looking for a woman in the insurance industry. I looked at her at a totally straight face. I said, no one's ever looking for a woman in the insurance industry. I said, I've been in this industry 30 years and no one is ever looking for a woman. She said, well, we are. I said, I had no idea what she was. I said, if you're looking for a woman, I'm your it girl, because you're never going to find anyone with my background or my credentials and expertise. We don't exist. She said, can I have your card? And 2 days later, I get a call from I believe the lieutenant governor from the state of California for my interview.
Wow.
So the rest.
Wow. I love this. You're the it girl.
Right.
You're like, I am your it girl. I love that.
And I was just being sincere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love it that you said yes. So many women and folks that I've had the luxury of interviewing, they said yes when they weren't 100% confident, but sometimes you say yes and you live into the opportunity. But when you knew, right, there was that sense of that's, yeah.
Well, when they asked me to put in and to fill out my application, and I first checked with my son because I didn't really know what it entailed, the type of commitment that it entailed if my son was okay, if I was going to be away 3-4 days a month. So there was some checking it out.
Sure. No, but I think that's such a great story. I love that.
Thank you.
And I wonder, you've had so many wonderful examples of, both private and public company, board roles that you've been very successful at. But I wonder if there's a particular governance challenge as a board member that you could reflect on or maybe share that particularly tested the system, and maybe what you learned as a board member from navigating it.
Yeah. So when I served on CalPERS, the board is predominated by labor leaders. And when I got on the board, the discount rate, in other words, what they managed the portfolio to, was 8%. So what does that mean? Generally, the more you have to earn on your investments, the greater risk you're taking.
Mm-hmm.
But the larger the discount rate that the portfolio is managed to, that also impacts retirement contributions, because to the extent they earn more on their investment earnings, the retirees don't have to contribute as much. So the rub there is that labor typically does not want to lower the discount rate because they don't want to go back to their members and say, you know what, you're going to have to increase your contributions.
Right.
It's not a popular stance to take. So I was really proud that during my tenure, we lowered the discount rate from 8 to 7, which to 7%, which lowered the risk and increased the financial strength of the system. But it's something that had to be discussed. It wasn't just, oh, great, because they had to go back to their constituents who weren't going to be happy about increasing contributions.
Yeah, it sounds like a great win. But like you say, those things are never easy.
Never
especially when you're
easy.
dealing with a diverse board and different opinions, et cetera. Yeah, interesting. You formerly served on the board of the International Corporate Governance Network, ICGN. And I'd love to know, if there was an initiative there that really resonated with you, and why it would have mattered on maybe a global scale.
Yeah, so just for people out there who may be listening and not know what ICGN is, it's ICGN, International Corporate Governance Network, is a global organization made up of the top institutional investors in the world and major corporations, Microsoft, et cetera. And they use their collective voice to establish global standards of governance. So when I was on the board there, and just to give you an idea of the enormity of their impact collectively, we represent about $74 trillion in assets. The CEO of Microsoft will actually come to the meeting because it's unusual that you can be in front of your largest investor base.
Got it.
So it was after the global financial crisis, and one of the big issues was CEO compensation, because nobody had a problem paying for performance, but I don't know if you remember that after the crisis, a lot of companies that went under, their CEOs were walking away with hundreds of millions of dollars in pay packages.
Yes.
So where we used our collective voice is changing that. We didn't have a problem for paying for performance, but not failure. And to basically tie CEO compensation into long-term metrics like increasing revenue and profitability over time, sustainability, so that they couldn't walk away when a company went under with such enormous pay packages.
Yeah, that's tremendous. I don't think I knew that was a big part of the initiative there.
Well, this was a while ago,
right? But how impactful, right?
Right.
Wow. And how does your global governance perspective, influence some of the decisions and the strategies that you then, after going through something like that, right? How does that impacted the more, I'll say, sort of U.S.-based institutions that you've worked with, right? Like CalPERS, et cetera?
Well, I think it's the same fundamentals that good governance and effective leadership creates long-term value creation and sustains companies long-term. So it's about having those standards in the companies that we invest in. And if you're a company, it increases shareholder value over time. And I think what underpins all of that is long-term value creation. Short-termism, in other words, I can make my company potentially look more successful by lowering my marketing budget so we look more profitable, but that might not be the game plan to create valuation long-term.
Right. No, absolutely. And it kind of leads into my next question, which is, you know, you've had a front row seat, you know, to see sort of how large institutions, you know, balance that long-term commitments, right, like pensions and healthcare with short-term market volatility. Like you just said, you know, what lessons do you think boards and executives can apply to data to maybe better align strategy and that long-term strategy with sustainable risk management?
It's a challenge. I don't think in private equity they are facing the same challenges because your earnings aren't reported daily and people can't just turn on Bloomberg and see the how the markets
doing,
how they're doing. It's a challenge because shareholders want to see price appreciation, but I think it's being committed to long-term value creation and being a steward of capital.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And are there overlooked risks that leaders should be planning for? I mean, not just financially, but just reputationally and operationally?
Well, I think today more than ever, and I'm not necessarily the expert to discuss on cyber risks, but what I always try to ensure is, and my mantra is when we're underwriting risks, are the risks that we're underwriting the risks that we're assuming. When I chaired risk and audit for CalPERS, I wanted to know if there were off-balance sheet items that I might not be aware of that when factored in would create a different financial picture.
Right. Yeah, interesting. And I think maybe I would ask from a personal philosophy standpoint, you know, when you think about, are there certain roles? I know you've mentioned a couple of times that long-term thinking, but, you know, are there certain characteristics, responsibilities that make for a more effective or ethical board member? You know, are there things that you've come to appreciate that certain board members need to have, you know, as it relates to taking on the responsibility of being on a board?
Well, I can just speak for myself. So when I was on CalPERS, I was a board member as a trustee, and my number one thing was to ensure that we had the wherewithal and the ability to pay the promised benefits to the retirees. So I would ask myself every day that I served, am I doing something that ensures our ability to pay the promised benefits? As to shareholders of a company, then I would be asking myself, is what I'm doing or the actions I'm taking doing something to ensure and increase shareholder value over time?
And that's the measuring stick, right? Right. I think that's a great barometer to use.
Thank you.
A great check-in. And I think that's fair to speak from your own experience, not necessarily of our all.
Right.
But I think, you know, the other thing is that a lot of times, you know, boards are comprised of, and in a good way, different perspectives, right? And
absolutely.
You want that, right? But it also makes it even more challenging to build consensus, you know, and to foster that sort of collaborative approach, right? Especially when it comes to making strategic decisions, you know, long-term decisions versus, you know, short-term. And how to invest, where to invest, et cetera. So I wonder if you have an example of, a very diverse board that you are on
Right.
and how you work to help build consensus.
Yeah. I feel that I served on probably the most politicized board in the country. Actually, a politician people would know very well in a namesake family once said that to me. So, how do you build consensus? I'll tell you how you build consensus. You build consensus by breaking bread with people, by having dinner, going to lunch, going to breakfast. When I served on CalPERS, we had monthly meetings, and I was in Sacramento 3-4 days a month. Every Monday night that I was in Sacramento each month, I would have dinner with my fellow board members. And you break bread, you understand their issues. Also, it's important to understand the rationale behind their issues. And lastly, and I think most importantly, you show you care about them. And when Governor Brown appointed me, I also was the independent member of the board. So I was in a unique position. But when you can build those personal relationships, you're able to build consensus because people care about each other and know each other.
Yeah, I think that lands so smartly. When you're connecting with someone,
Right.
and you're actually curious
Right.
about why they hold the beliefs they
Right.
do,
Right.
how they came to that opinion,
right.
or that position.
Right.
Even if you never stand on the same side of the aisle,
Right.
you still have a better understanding of where that individual
Right.
as a human is coming from,
Right.
and that does it does a lot to bridge the gap. Right.
It really does. It
Yeah.
really does.
That's a great example. I love that.
Yeah. And I can tell you there were certain people who weren't out to like me just because I wasn't labor, I wasn't union,
Mm-hmm.
but to this day we still talk.
That's great. That's a win.
Yeah.
That's such a
a
win.
total win.
Absolutely. I love that. And, if you were to think back, I know, again, many times we end up where we are, and it's not without having sacrificed along
Right.
the way.
Right.
Is there a particular sacrifice at the time that you made that you didn't you might not have even known it was a sacrifice, but that's kind of contributed, to where you are? I quote often on this show my grandmother who used to say, "Poop makes great fertilizer."
That's true.
And so I wonder, from what, was there poop that a garden grew from for you?
Well, hey, my dad was a big gardener. So I would say the sacrifice, I kind of alluded to it initially, was the time away from my son. And I had initially talked to him because I said if he wasn't comfortable that I wouldn't do this. How did it? I also, when I got off, I was appointed under Brown, and I turned my resignation in to Governor Newsom. It was to be with my family because there were some things, family issues I needed to tend to. So I would say ultimately it turned out to be a good thing, but it was a tough journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because look, there's only so much time, and people who have big careers, it takes your time.
It does.
There's just no getting around it.
Yeah. It's there's an offset
Right.
somehow, right?
Right. And today, my son would say he's very proud of me, and I'm very proud of him.
That's great. Well, I think there's probably quite a few folks watching, that are aspiring to get to the C-suite, to get to the boardroom, to make an impact, somehow in that way. Is there any, maybe advice or insight that you would offer to folks that are really navigating their way to try to get to an opportunity to be on a board to make an impact, similar to what you've done?
Well, I think today it's all about there being a fit. And I know, at least as a woman, I can only talk from the from the genre that I came from, is have a niche expertise, but you still have to have a general expertise. For example, at Apollo, where I'm part of the private markets, they wanted someone with an insurance background, which I have. I know the product side. You also had to know alternative investments, which I know. CalPERS having the largest private equity portfolio in the country, and I served on the investment committee for 5 years, and also risk and audit. I chaired risk and audit. So it's about being the right fit, which I had particular expertise even when Governor Brown appointed me in the insurance industry, managing to a liability that's actuarially based. But you still have to have general knowledge of the company that you're interested in being a part of, as well as being able to bring some niche level of expertise.
I like that. That sort of knowing how your unique sort of,
exactly.
Skill sets play into something, right?
Maybe today it's coding, it's something else, where I obviously am not a fit.
Right. Yeah, I think it's good guidance. Know your niche and play to that. And when you look ahead, are there innovations or reforms that you believe are really needed when it comes to risk management, governance, and even public pension systems?
It's a great question, Nicole. And I think underlying everything is transparency, that we just having open dialogue, conversation, etc. And I think the other thing would be stewardship, to see yourself as a steward of capital, or if you're representing the shareholders, create that they're the people you serve. In my situation on CalPERS, it was the retirees.
I love that transparency, which we could use more of
everywhere. Yes.
And this stewardship, I love that. That we are all serving.
Right.
And I think, at our highest good, we're all in service in some capacity. And then, like you say, the word stewardship, I think is that really resonates. Very good. And tell me, I know you've got a lot of miles left on your tires in terms of,
I hope,
all of the impact absolutely that you're looking to make. But I do want to ask a little bit about legacy when it comes to, have you started thinking at all in terms of, all of the influence that you've had with different organizations or the communities, that you've served? Is there something that, you think, someday I want to look back and that'll be my legacy here?
It's interesting question. And I just want to be an effective role model, someone that people look at with respect. She did a good job. And so my legacy is that I am a role model for the people that follow me, to be an effective role model. It's kind of simple.
I think that's, I think it's simple, but I think it's absolutely, I think that's great.
Thank you.
And how would you define success? And do you see yourself as a success?
Well, it's an interesting question because I've had to work on that personally, because I realized, some of the things that get you where you want to be in life, I don't need anymore. Like it was, I'm always used to being so driven. What's the next thing, that you don't always enjoy the moment, the serenity. So I think everybody has to define success for me. First and foremost, because I sacrificed it for a while. I'm very fortunate to be married to a man I love and come home to someone I love. That makes me feel really successful, because a checking account doesn't keep you warm at night. And when you're having a bad day, there's no one to put their arms around you and say, you know what, you look beautiful and I love you. So for me, success is having a good family and home life. It's that I'm enough. The feeling of just being enough right where I am.
I love that. That there's nothing outside of you that is needed.
Right.
That it's just, I think that's very successful.
Oh, thank you.
But
everybody's got to define it for themselves. Sure. It took, and by the way, it took me a while to get there.
Right.
Right. It took me a long time. That's another podcast, but a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the journey, right?
It's the journey, right.
I love it. And any last sort of leave behinds, thoughts, any guidance? We've got an audience that of executives that are either on boards or trying to get on boards, or folks that are just looking for some inspiration on how to crack the code of it all. Any last thoughts or insights you want to share?
I know it sounds very trite and overused, but I think it's about accepting and finding who you are, and then find the fit. And I say that because on the recent thing that I'm doing with Apollo, it's really a fit. It plays to my expertise. And I think when things work, you just feel it.
Right. There's no forcing.
There's no forcing.
Right. It flows.
It flows. Right.
Yeah. I think that's a great call out.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. I love it.
Probably not what you expected,
No,
but
I think it's great. And clearly, it's come with years of experience,
right.
And I think that's terrific. Well, I'm just so grateful to have
I'm
had you here,
grateful.
and had your time, and been able to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I wish you all the best in your continued success in your journey. And I get to be part of it, and I so am blessed for your friendship. So thank you.
Oh, and back at you, and your mentorship has meant the world. So I'm infinitely grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.